Norman Mailer is with us tonight. He is a most, I hate that word interesting, controversial, I guess, figure in the journalistic world since he first came out with Naked and Dead some 25 years ago. Currently he's contributed the text for a fascinating book called The Faith of Graffiti. And he's won the Pulitzer Prize and the National Book Award. Would you welcome Mr. Norman Mailer? I read somewhere else the other day that graffiti is really plural. True?
I hope not. Oh, you mean, the word.
Yeah, word graffiti is plural, and I'd never thought about that.
I was thinking you meant graffitis. I was thinking of my title, The Faith of Graffitis.
The Faith of... All right, now, what would be the singular of, or is there no singular?
Graffito.
Graffito?
Graffito is singular.
Didn't know that before.
Well, I've heard people say graffito. I don't really know if such a word exists, but
yeah.
Really, it's a plural word.
Right.
You know, it almost has no meaning taken by itself. It's the fact that a lot of people do it.
Yeah, where did it come from? Did you ever check into the derivation? Now, maybe people don't know what graffiti is, and it's almost a new art form all of itself. I suppose when people wrote Kilroy was here in World War II, that was a kind of graffiti?
Yeah, that was the beginning of it.
Personal... Well, is it the desire to have something of your own emblazoned? Is it like the people who go out on rocks, which I hate? You drive through a beautiful park or something, and you see people who've gone up and chiseled their name and say Bill and Jane, 1939, and carve something. Is it that desire, the ego, to be permanently emblazoned somewhere?
It's got a great deal to do with ego, but it's a funny phenomenon. You know, to begin with, most people, when you talk about graffiti, most people think of bathroom graffiti.
Yeah.
And I wish there really were two words, because what I'm writing about is subway graffiti.
Yeah. Let me just show them this picture, first of all. Where's this from? This is New York?
Yeah, they're all from New York, all the pictures.
And some of it, believe it or not, is quite artistic in nature. It's some kind of an expression.
Well, if you look at the, if you notice, all the names on the left are small, relatively, and on the right, you see the beginning of star.
Yeah, we'll pan over there. Right.
That one on the right that's large, star 3, is called a masterpiece. The definition of a masterpiece is that it is anywhere from 3 to 6 feet high, the letters, and it's about anywhere from 10 to 60 feet long. There are masterpieces that cover the entire side of a subway car. Right. And on top of that, they take a lot of time to paint, which is the crucial difference. In other words, that probably took at least 30 minutes and maybe an hour to do. Now, since they're doing it in a subway yard, with one eye over their shoulder, waiting for the cops, it takes a lot of grace under pressure to do it.
Now, a lot of people would say, hey, that's nothing but vandalism and defacing public property and so forth. Did you find out a lot about this and what causes it? And
well, it's of course, technically, it's vandalism. There's no question legally that it's vandalism. And in fact, you know, some kids have been arrested. A good many of them get beaten up when they're caught. They're afraid of getting beaten up, and that's part of the pressure of it. But, you know, what are they defacing? They're defacing ugly subway stations. They're defacing bare, blank walls in cities that are terribly dull. Right. I mean, they bring a little color to the environment. So I've never felt that they were really defacing so much as improving the environment. You know, nobody ever asked themselves whether a corporation has the right to build a huge blank office building that 100,000 people have to look at every day on the way to work. Right. I mean, you look at those buildings and you get a little depressed.
It's not too aesthetic, yeah.
And, well, it's more than that almost. It's a feeling of, my God, the world's big and it's blank, and it makes you feel smaller. And I think a lot of this is not just simply individual ego, although there's a lot of that in it, but there's also a certain sense of almost a collective ego. I mean, the kids really do band together and cooperate. Right. One of the things that characterizes, they never write over each other's handwriting. They really try to avoid that, so that in all the chaos, apparently, of these drawings, if you look at it closely, you see there's very, very little overwriting. Yeah. And when it is, they tend to almost overwrite in such a way that they don't ruin the signature below. We could put on any one of these. I think I could show you that.
Yeah, we'll get some illustration here. I don't know whether they could...
this would be a good example.
Yeah, if you can get close enough on this. This is in a tunnel wall. And as you say, the tunnel wall itself is kind of boring. It's blank. Really has no character. And you'll see here that it's almost surrealistic in form. Now, come in real close on some of these things. This is New York City, I would assume, again.
Yeah, it's an underpass, you know, and it looks just a big, shiny, white porcelain place, very dull. Looks like a, you know, men's room, a huge men's room for whales, maybe. And then you've got all that careful little drawing. Looks like little plants, foliage. And the only thing I'd ask of it is that it would grow another 8 feet so it covers the entire wall.
But as you say, nobody has seemed to overlap or
No, they
destroyed anybody else's.
I think we'd have to go in closer to see
yeah,
that.
can you go in a little closer on that and just we'll get another come in a little closer with the camera. Is this a recent phenomenon? Has graffiti been with us? But there's been such an upsurge of this kind of graffiti just in the last few years, which is really new in that sense.
It really hit its peak in New York about a year ago. And when I wrote the book, I thought it was all over. The tone of my piece in the book. Inside the book, it consists of much more than my piece. I wrote a piece for the book, and the book has something like 50 beautiful photographs by a photographer named John Narr, which came first. I saw the photographs first and then wanted to write the book. But John Lindsay hated this graffiti. Hated it because I think he felt it was doing more to undermine his administration than almost anything around. He used to fight it tooth and nail, you know, after he was a great champion of the ghetto, but he did hate this aspect of it, hated it. And so toward the end of his administration, I think he wanted to turn over a clean house.
Right,
and he put on a big push to end graffiti and partially succeeded, so that while I was writing this piece, the subway trains were sort of half scrubbed over. You know, they all look really dirty now because the graffiti had been wiped off and just smudges were left. And back of that, there was very little new stuff coming on. Now, since Beam has come in, it's as if it's started all over again. And so the tone in which I wrote this is already just a tiny bit outdated. It looks like there's going to be a new wave of graffiti which might be bigger than the last one.
Did you find, does this have anything to do with obscenity? Did you find much,
no,
whatever that definition is, but what I'm talking about, the kind of words that would, it doesn't seem to be in most of it.
See, that's bathroom graffiti, is obscene, you almost always, or else it's witty, you know, but, or presidential in its tone. But, but this stuff is, this stuff has almost no interest in words as such.
In shock value, yeah.
It's interested in the name, and they all pick a name that's not their own. And then it's interested, in really in painting. They call it writing. They talk about writing your name. Or they'll say, I hit the name 50 times today, or I wrote the name, 25 times today, or whatever. But what they're really doing is they're painting. It's a form of painting. I mean, they're taking color and then putting forms up on a wall.
Did you talk to many of these? And it's mainly a youthful phenomenon, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I must talk to altogether maybe 15 or 20 kids, and maybe 4 or 5 I talked to quite a while. And most of them are black or Puerto Rican, and they run in age. Most of them around 13 or 14, 15.
And it has to be an identification thing, doesn't it? I mean...
Oh, very much. And also it's sort of a general agreement that they usually stop doing it about the time they get heavy interest in girls. Although some women are also doing it.
Right.
And it's sort of, the kids have a great awareness of what everyone else is doing in it. In other words, there are areas that run from about 110th Street in Manhattan clear up to parts of the North Bronx, I'd say.
Did you find a different kind of graffiti?
Well, there's styles. It's a technical subject. You get into Brooklyn graffiti, Bronx graffiti, Manhattan graffiti. There's a Broadway style, so on and so forth. But I think we could get into it, but we'd never get out of it. And the main thing is this awareness they all have of what everyone's doing.
Right.
So that they'll hear of various people doing things clear across the city. And of course, there's a fellow named Hugo Martinez who got the best of them together and formed pretty much a working union. And some of them actually sold some of these their graffiti on canvases for as much as $2,000 and $3,000 at the Razor Gallery in New York.
So don't knock it. Maybe the...
Well, I think some of them have had their lives obviously changed by it and have had careers beginning. But that's not the main element. The main element is that these kids are doing it because it's a way, it's a way of contending with the government. I've always felt that the toughest, problem maybe that democracy ever faces is that we have the sense that we have no effect on it.
Right.
We can vote, but that's about all we can generally do. We don't participate.
This way they get some kind of reaction from what is happening.
Yeah, I think so. I think they have a feeling that at least maybe they're not part of the power, but at least they're making the power very nervous and unhappy, and they enjoy that. So.
Let me interrupt for a moment. We will be back after the latest look at People magazine. We're back. We're talking to Norman Mailer, first of all, about the fate of graffiti. You really have to see the book. It's actually fascinating, and it surely is an art form. Beautiful photographs in there. I read somewhere you're working on a new novel. I suppose it's always a dumb question to ask a writer what it's about, because it's difficult to explain in a kind of succinct terminology what goes into a book. But
I can tell you what it's not about.
yeah, all right, we'll start there.
Because what it's not about is what was reported in the newspapers.
What did they say it was about, or not about?
Well, in the newspapers it was said that it's a book about a nice Jewish family that starts with the pyramids and goes forth through time into a spaceship. Now, you know, there are great
Where
many-
would they get that?
Well, I got my suspicions about where they got it, but I can't prove it. You'd have to use Lenin's old formula of whom does this benefit? It didn't benefit the publisher, and it didn't benefit me, so I got a third party, but I can't accuse them.
All right. No supporting evidence.
No supporting evidence. But you know what I thought? Instead of talking about this novel,
Sure.
which after all, I'm not really going to talk about because I think it's bad luck to talk about a novel. I'll
Okay.
just say it's going to be a very long novel. I'm going to be working on it for about 5 to 7 years, and it's going to be about 500 to 700,000 words. And both those are impossibilities. It's said of me that's impossible that I work on anything. You know,
5 to 7 years.
And also, nobody reads a book that's, 500 to 700,000 words.
So then why are you writing a book, 500, 700,000?
Well, it just, I want to see if it can be done, truly. I mean, I've had this idea for all my life just about, and I really want to, it would be fun to see if it's possible
Yeah.
to write a book that's 2,000 pages long, say, that's just truly readable.
Can you stay at peak writing form for that length of time?
Well, of course, over 7 years, you don't have to be at peak writing form every day.
Right.
But half the days you do have to be over that period. It's a long stretch. But what I did want to talk about is something else altogether, which is I just finished a book by a man named Robert Slater called The Life and Curious Death of Marilyn Monroe. And in it, at the end of it, he did an awful lot of work about her death. He did all the work that, in effect, I didn't do and should have done.
Right, because you were subject to
I was writing under tremendous deadline.
pretty heavy criticism there that it was a superficial job and
Yeah, and
you did it to make a quick buck and all of that.
Well, I didn't do it to
Yes.
make a quick buck, but it was a superficial job because I promised to do a preface and I got to a full-length book and there was no time left. But at any rate, Slater's book really presents such a massive amount of evidence for the possibility of the murder that you're left with the feeling that it's going to be harder now to prove that she did commit suicide than that she was murdered. And I think it's going to be kind of a shocker if people paying attention to this, because he calls for a coroner's investigation, a coroner's inquest of it. And I think there's enough
Even
evidence
now, you
here.
mean?
Yeah.
That's fascinating. Now, I had not heard that. Those things usually are never resolved, are they, unless there's absolutely hard rock evidence, because the principal
Well, it
is
isn't a
gone,
matter-
and you have to reconstruct everything from witnesses from 10 years ago, and where do you end up in the long haul?
Well, you can't ever, I don't think it would ever be a matter of finding who the murderer was.
Right.
Or whether, what you can find out is whether there's any chance it was a suicide, or whether it was impossible it was a suicide. I think the coroner's inquest could establish that much, because there's a huge amount of evidence. Just a tiny example of it, just a tiny little detail. She was found in the nude, allegedly taking sleeping pills. One coroner, who's one of the most distinguished coroners in America, said that in all his experience of 20 years, no woman ever committed suicide taking sleeping pills in the nude. One woman had shot herself in the nude,
Right.
but no woman had ever done that. Well, you could advance the argument that Marilyn Monroe was used to living in the nude, and if any woman was ever going to do it, it'd be Marilyn Monroe. You see, in other words, it's not overwhelming evidence.
You can take the other side, yes.
Then you have that matter that she died without anything in her stomach and a huge overdose in her veins, which points very heavily toward an injection. Now, I've talked to any number of
I
coroners.
wasn't aware that it was an injection.
Well, the coroner's report says nothing of an injection. But there are all sorts of rumors about that. One of the things that Slater points up is there was a 700-page investigation by the police, original report that's 700 pages long that was boiled down to 52 pages. And he wants to know what happened to the other 650 pages.
Well, are you inferring that there was an attempt at, or there could be an attempt at some cover-up then?
Oh, yeah, well,
and it's true?
Slater's flat out about it, that there was a cover-up. He quotes a police officer named Jack Clemens, who was in the Los Angeles Police Department, who feels that everybody involved there was lying because, the death, according to Clemens, occurred first at 10:30 in the morning. I beg your pardon, 10:30 in the evening.
That's right.
Because of the rigor mortis. He arrived about 4 o'clock, 4:30. And by his experience as a police officer, he was certain she'd been dead at least 6 hours. And he was convinced that the doctors had been there. And so his argument was that everybody involved was not telling the truth.
Were there not people who had talked with her previous to that time, up until several hours before the time of death was established? According to what I've read.
No one apparently has talked to her after 10:30. Then also the chief of police in Los Angeles, Parker, pulled all the telephone calls that had been made. He kept them.
Right.
This man Clemens was fired from the force a month later. Now, of course, he could have been a disgruntled cop, or it could have been fired because he knew too much and was beginning to complain and he was not in charge of the investigation, and he wanted to be. Well, this is just a little bit of the evidence. There's much, much more in this book.
That's fascinating. Actually, yes, I didn't know all that. Is that book out now?
It's just coming out right about now.
We've opened up a whole new...
I think it's really going to open the case.
We have to cut away. I'm sorry. We'll be right back. We are back now. Well, that's a fascinating theory, and you never know for sure whether those... as I say, what will they accomplish in the long run anyways? You said if they don't know the truth, what good does it establish? If you said if it was, let's assume.
Jack, I think that's one thing that's really important.
Yeah, Johnny. That's all right. That's okay.
There's never a man named John who can't be called Jack. Isn't that so?
Okay, Fred. No, I know what you're saying. Yeah,
Alfred,
they are intertwined. Yeah.
You could call me something awful like Norm. Well, I won't tell you what you call me. It's awful because everybody would call me that. But okay, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
John. Look, everybody has lived for years with the idea that Marilyn Monroe was a tragic suicide.
Mm-hmm.
And what that meant was that the perils of female adventuring out into the extensions of their own personality were doom. In other words, if you really tried to be a bold woman, you were destroyed by yourself. And what if instead she was really coming around the bend and beginning to put her life together, and she got killed? And she didn't kill herself. There's a huge difference there. There's a difference in our history, because she was one of our culture heroines.
You haven't discussed any motive yet without even getting or intimating any people or personalities or such.
I'd rather not, because I think talking about it too quickly could really be bad. But I think, all right, I have to a little bit. Let me just say this much about it. It was obvious that there are some people who think, and I don't agree with them, that the Kennedys, if there was a murder, the Kennedys would have had something to do with it. And I think that's absolute nonsense for a simple reason, which is that the Kennedys were extraordinarily sophisticated people. If ever anyone in the history of this country knew how to handle publicity and bad publicity and were not afraid of it, it was the Kennedys, starting with Joe Kennedy, and Jack certainly knew how to handle his publicity, and Bobby did too. But I think there were people who wanted to damage the Kennedys. The Kennedys had many enemies all over the place. They had enemies in the CIA, the FBI, and in the trade unions. And there were any number of people who knew that something was going on between Marilyn Monroe and Bobby Kennedy. It doesn't mean that they were necessarily even having an affair. But the general opinion in Hollywood at the time was that they were.
No, that's opinion, you're right.
Well, but what they felt, and as a matter of fact, they were right to a certain extent, was that there'd be a tremendous amount of bad publicity about it. And more, maybe. It may be the murder, if it was a murder, was sufficiently clumsy so that it might have been that the intent, if it was particularly clever, it might have been to make it look like a suicide first, then the police would quickly penetrate that, discover a murder, and then it might have been the worst publicity in the world for the Kennedys. Because even though if they could have proved absolutely that they had absolutely nothing to do with it, which is very hard always to do, half the country would never have believed it. So that there could have been a tremendously serious intent here. Now that's quite different from a lonely girl who never quite managed to succeed with success, killing herself.
Yeah.
And we are building our history and our idea of what our history is.
But as Chuck Heston said earlier, did he not? I didn't mean to interrupt you. Didn't he say that she had intimated in her previous thing that attempts or had suggested it herself to friends that she might possibly...
She tried to commit suicide 10 or 12 times, at least in her life.
So there's certainly a pattern there of...
Oh, the fact that she could have committed suicide is obviously there. Everybody assumed it was a suicide because of her many attempts in the past. But the point is, if you're going to commit suicide by taking sleeping pills, and you take 50 pills, let's say, there's all sorts of records left in your body. There are pills left in your stomach. You know, by the time you die from the 50 pills, you don't die after digesting all 50 pills. You die after digesting half the 50 pills. The other half are still in your stomach in one form or another. There was nothing in her stomach. There was an ounce of a meaningless liquid. There was nothing in her intestine that we know about, because the small intestine was removed for study. You see, because if it passes through the stomach, it doesn't pass through the small intestine. But when I asked the coroner, Thomas Noguchi, what had happened to the small intestine, he said that they hadn't examined it. And I said, well, you say on your report that you removed it for study. Why didn't you examine it? He said, well, there weren't the facilities. And I said, You mean in Los Angeles in 1962, after the death of Marilyn Monroe, there weren't the facilities to examine a small intestine? He said, no, there weren't.
I thank you very much. Fascinating theory. We'll wait and follow up on that and see what happens.
Okay.
Thank you, Norman. Thank you, David.